Revelation chapter 10 speaks of the time of the voice of the seventh angel. It says at that time the mystery of God will be finished. The mystery of God will be finished. Now, what is it talking about, the mystery of God? Well, mystery means something that is not known completely. There's some question. And the mystery of God basically boils down to the question of God's existence. Is there a God or is there not? That is the mystery of God. And to say that it will be finished means that the existence of God will become known. And basically, long story short, when it says the mystery of God will be finished, that means it's talking about the second coming of Christ occurring in such a way that people will see that Christ exists, and so there will be no atheists. Atheism will be finished, like the mystery of God will be finished. Atheism will be finished. So when it says that this will happen at the time of the voice of the seventh angel, it's talking about the seven roars. Now, in chapter 10, verse 3, it's talking about an angel crying out, and it says that when he shouts or screams, seven thunders utter their voices. The seven thunders are a way of magnifying or emphasizing the voice of this angel. And going by the description of the angel, I can say with a straight face that the angel may be Christ. That's even though we do not usually think of Christ as an angel. The angel Michael in the book of Daniel is, the word Michael means one who is like God in the Hebrew. And so that could fit Christ, the Son of God, because the Son of God, God the Son, is like God the Father. So the passages about Michael are passages that could be applied to Christ, and therefore, because Michael is called an angel, then this allows us to say that Christ can be called an angel if Michael is Christ. One more thing about Michael. It says in Daniel that he is the prince of Israel, if I'm not mistaken. He is the prince of the holy people, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not looking it up right now. Now I want to emphasize this phrase, the mystery of God will be finished. The mystery of God. The mystery. The glorious mystery of God will be finished. And how glorious will be that day, the day of the second coming. That's what it's talking about. Because that's what will clear things up. When Christ appears in the sky over Jerusalem, that's in Zechariah chapter 14. Now, why does this have to be Christ? Because when he left the world, when he ascended, he left from the Mount of Olives. And according to Zechariah 14, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives when he descends from heaven. Now, my view is that he won't descend all the way to the ground. He won't be touching the ground with his feet. This is only, this statement about his feet coming to the Mount of Olives is only to establish that we're talking about the same person who left from the Mount of Olives. In Acts 1, it says, "This same Jesus whom you saw depart will return in like manner," which would mean to the Mount of Olives. And I would have to interpret this passage in terms of Acts 9, verse 3. I believe that Zechariah 14, where Christ appears in the sky, is nothing more than Acts 9, verse 3, where Christ appears to Saul on the road to Damascus. It's simply a repetition, but on a larger scale. He won't be appearing to one man, he'll be appearing to the whole Russian army, which is invading Israel, doing basically what Saul of Tarsus was doing. We read in Acts 9 that he was waging war. It uses that term against the Jews that believed in Christ, and the Russian soldiers will be waging war against the Jews that live in Israel, the Israelis. So there is a nice parallel there. And the idea is that when the Russian soldiers see Christ, their reaction will be much like Saul of Tarsus. They will mutiny against their officers, the ones that go over to Christ's side will mutiny against the loyalists that stay with the Antichrist, the ruler of Russia. And then we pick up the story in Isaiah 66, verse 19. It says that that God will send the survivors of the nations that attacked Israel. That's talking about the soldiers that attacked Israel, that invaded Israel. The survivors will go to the nations, in other words, back home. And it says their mission, God will send them on a mission. Their mission will be to declare God's glory. Now, what glory of God is that? Well, the glory of the second coming of Christ, because that's what they have just witnessed at that same time. And they go home to tell what they saw. So we can see that the time of the finishing of the mystery of God, in other words, the time that God appears, will be no wonder that the angel speaks with a roar of 7 thunders, because this will be such a glorious day when Russian soldiers go from being the enemy of God over to being the soldiers for God, who do what? What do? They go home and they overthrow the government of the Antichrist. How glorious is that? So Christ becomes the Savior of the world by overthrowing Gorbachev, the Antichrist. But how does he do it? He does it through using the Russian soldiers. Now this is very important because the whole world will hate the Russians up until this time, because Russia is the country of the Antichrist, the country the Antichrist uses. The military of Russia is what the Antichrist will use to conquer the world, conquer Western Europe, and bomb America. And basically that gives the rest of the world to the Antichrist. So instead of saying he conquers Europe, we can actually say he conquers the world. But my point is, the whole world will hate the Antichrist. Just like when Russia conquered Eastern Europe after World War II, people in those countries hated the Russians. They hated the Russian occupation. The same thing will be true when Russia occupies Eastern Europe again and occupies Western Europe. And but by Christ arranging for the Russian soldiers that invade Israel, arranging for them to go home and overthrow Gorbachev, God is arranging for the world to love the Russians, love Russia, because it's Russian soldiers that overthrow the Antichrist. Now you may say, how can Gorbachev be the Antichrist? He's 80, he will be 89 next year, and that's when I'm expecting his attack. Now, it could actually be before that. It could actually be in October at the Feast of Tabernacles. But actually, I'd have to lean toward Pentecost of 2020. Anyway, the main thing I want to say about Gorbachev ruling the world is Russia will rule for only 5 months. That's in Revelation 9, verse 5 and 10. Christ says, I will come quickly. Now, if we apply that to starting with the time that Russia takes over the world through nuclear war, that's in Revelation 13:7. It says the beast will make war. Now, if we apply the quickly idea, coming quickly, 5 months would fit that, because if he comes 5 months after Russia takes over the world, that is coming quickly. Christ will actually literally come quickly, starting from the time that Russia takes over. And so I have a basis, I have biblical support for the 5 months idea. Now, coming quickly, that's in the book of Revelation, at the beginning of the book of Revelation, but also at the end. But getting back to the idea of why Gorbachev, old man Gorbachev, how could he be the Antichrist? Well, the main thing the Antichrist is known for is, if you look in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, there's the lying wonders. He works through lying wonders, which can be interpreted to mean wonderful lies, lies that are wonderful, because they create hope. And his lie, back in the late 1980s, was that Russia was changing into a democracy, and that was a wonderful idea. And he ended the Cold War. He freed Eastern Europe. He pulled his troops out of Eastern Europe, out of Afghanistan, and these are all lies that he told. he was letting Afghanistan become free. Russia was giving up its empire. It gave up the captive nations in terms of the republics of the USSR and the captive nations of Eastern Europe. And so Russia was no longer being an empire, in other words, imperialist. And this is all lies. And he did it why? Well, Daniel 8, verse 25 says, by peace he will destroy many. Peace as a lie. And this is actually shown also in 1 Thessalonians, where it says they will speak of peace and safety. And then sudden destruction comes, which means the peace idea was a lie. And the safety idea is a lie. And the whole idea was he told these lies so that America would disarm. Russia could not bomb America as long as we had our nuclear arsenal with which we could retaliate after a Russian attack. Russia could never attack us. And so the only hope that Russia had was to get us to disarm. And the only way they could get us to disarm was to end the Cold War. We would not disarm during the Cold War, obviously. So it's obvious that they had to end the Cold War. So that explains why they ended the Cold War, why they gave freedom to Eastern Europe. Anybody with a brain can figure it out. But who did all that? Gorbachev. Gorbachev. There's no way around it. He is the Antichrist. He has the mark on his forehead. When I saw that back in March of '85, I said, my God, or my goodness, this is it. He is it. He's the one. Because it's in the right place, on the right side of his forehead. And in Revelation 13, it says he will give a mark to people on their right hand and on their forehead. Now, if you take that as not the actual truth, but sort of a coded version of the truth, then we can apply that mark to who? To Gorbachev himself, to the Antichrist himself, rather than him giving it to other people. Anyway, what do I mean by code? Well, Mary Magdalene in Luke, I think it's like Luke 7, Luke 10, it says that Christ cast 7 demons out of her. Well, going by the Jewish way of numbering the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery is number 7. So the number 7, if you think of the 7 demons, not as 7 literal demons, but the number 7 is used to convey the 7th commandment. And that would be the sin that the demons would stand for. And it's not so much adultery, it can be prostitution. See, when it says, when the commandment against adultery is not limited to adultery. It doesn't mean that you can commit prostitution, and that's okay because prostitution is not mentioned in the 10 Commandments. No. The 7th commandment covers adultery, covers not just adultery, but prostitution. It covers fornication. In other words, the 10 Commandments are, they can be expanded upon. It's a little bit like shorthand. And, the thou shalt not commit adultery covers everything like adultery. And so the fact that Mary Magdalene is considered to have been a prostitute, that would be that would tie in with the 7th commandment. My point was that when it says that Christ cast out 7 demons, that can be code. That can be a code, a way of communicating that she was a prostitute. Because the 7th commandment is a commandment against prostitution if you interpret it broadly, if you amplify the 7th commandment. And I'm saying the same thing can apply to the mark of the beast in Revelation 13. That can be code for the mark that he himself will have. And then we apply that to who? To Gorbachev. In closing, I want to focus on the emphasis that is given in Revelation 10 to this phrase, the mystery of God will be finished. How that's underlined by the fact that it says the angel, when he cries with a loud voice, 7 thunders utter their voices. And this is trying to show how glorious the second coming will be. And so I'm going to write a transcript in the description box under this video. Please make a copy.